University in the Netherlands, although Ilke is currently in Belgium. And you are sharing your own slides, Ilke, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I will start sharing the slides and hope this will work. Let's see. Normally the slides are shared now. Yes, thank you. So good morning, my name is Ilke Grosemans. Thanks for having me here today. And I wrote our policy brief together with Nila de Kuiper. And we provided some more overarching advice, tips for career management. We focus on career management. As we all know, jobs are changing and the labor markets are changing. So investing in one's employability is important. It is important for everyone, but particularly for young adults entering the labor markets. And we wrote 3 parts of advice based on our broader research on education to work transitions. And the first one is invest in developing career competencies, which ties in with the talk of Dora earlier this morning. And on the more general level, these competencies are 3 types are distinguished: the knowing how competencies, focusing on relevant skills and expertise, knowing why, what motivates you and what are the values, and the knowing whom, the depth and breadth of the professional network. And in our study, we followed students 5 waves, and we find that young adults with stronger career competencies already in education, that we first find that they continue to develop these competencies later on once they enter the labor market. So they have a head start compared to young adults with lower career competencies. But we also find that these young adults are indeed more likely to start in a job that fits their prior education and in a job in which they report a higher job satisfaction compared to the adults with less developed career competencies in education. The second part of advice is related to this, and this to go beyond formal learning activities. When we talk to young adults about having stronger competencies, they mostly refer to formal learning activities, also because it's more visible, such as seminar or courses. But we do see that informal learning is very powerful as well. And examples here would be asking for feedback, learning by observing others, but also reading, watching visual material, etc. And we do see that informal learning might be particularly helpful at the start of the career. That this is very important when people enter a new job, and also it can be very important to further develop career competencies. And then finally, which ties in with what we heard of Eva and Beth, I think, is to choose for good work. We know that it's very difficult and stressful to find a job, and we do see that young adults are often tempted to accept a job offer, even when it is a job in underemployment, or when they're overeducated, and that does not fit their skills. And although it's tempting, our study demonstrates that students who start in underemployment, so in a job that does not fit their prior education, that they also get less opportunities to learn in their job, in contrast to graduates who start in a job that fits. So we do see that that might have scarring effects in the longer term. So I hope that was it within the 5 minutes, and thank you.
Yes, you actually had 2 minutes to spare.
Oh.
Thank you, Ilke. Yes, I think we didn't see the full slides because they weren't actually moving. But we got the idea of your talk anyway. Okay. Well, we're moving on to Michelle, yeah?
Yes, please. Next up, we've got Michelle Trottier from University of Glasgow, and Michelle's going to share her slides on career tips for attracting students into career services.
Yes, can you see my slides here?
Yes.
Fantastic. I ended up having to share my desktop, so hopefully it all worked.
Michelle, do you want to check that they're moving just before you start? Yes, sometimes in this webinar platform that happens.
Thanks
yeah.
for that. Yeah, it'd be not a whole lot on this slide, so it would feel a little bit slower perhaps. Just to introduce myself, my name is Michelle, and I'm hoping to share with you some of the more applied findings from my PhD research, and kind of take you through more so practical applications of how it might apply into career services, and hopefully it builds on quite nicely from what was shared earlier this morning. But essentially, maybe just for some context, this research really started with an applied problem, and that was that there's some really great career services being offered throughout the UK, but many career services are still sharing that those resources aren't being used by a large portion of the student body. And more concerning, where this research focuses on, is that the group of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds are one of the least likely groups to take up that service and use it. And there's lots of reasons that are complex about why these issues might be. And I'm not going to dive too far into those, because the intent of this discussion here is to more so look at practical applications of that. But just to name a few, less belonging that these students feel, time pressures, a disconnect from career service practitioners. But I'm going to more so go into a possible intervention that I explored, and kind of share some tips and tools that led to that working well, and areas that didn't work as well. So I looked at providing an online community of practice. And essentially what this was, it was a virtual learning environment, Moodle tool that had active forums and discussions that were led by students, and they would share expertise with each other. What I found was this was able to increase participation, but with that, there were nuances to that. So there were considerations and lessons learned about that experience that I think have good practical applications for others. So I've broken this down into 5 top tips, and just sharing the experiences of the students and the feedback that I've got on it, hopefully with more of an applied connection to others who want to consider this. So the first consideration that impacted how this went was the identity of the students. So what it was that students felt, how they felt most at home, most sense of belonging in terms of talking about their employability. And from speaking with different groups across the university where this was conducted, initial feedback was given to me that actually students at this institution didn't necessarily feel that sense of belonging as a school, but it was more specific within the school and discipline that they were talking about. So how can we be more specific? So you'll see that it's broken down, not with overall colleges, but specifically to the school. So forums were more targeted to an area where they felt the people within that forum were more similar to them. And some of the feedback we got from that is that students actually felt that the career service advice that they were being given was more targeted to them and more unique to their experience. So this was something that was perceived quite well by students. Second piece that I think worked well was providing structure to the community of practice. So what this intervention did was separate into topics. So you'll see some of the bottom that we have there: career goals, CV cover letter, interview prep, and providing students structure about what weekly topics that they could be talking about in the forums. Third piece that I think came up as something that was very useful was encouraging peer leaders. So there was students within the community of practice who really shared feelings of that they felt that they had more confidence in a particular area, they had more expertise, and they were able to share it with others and support others. And this was partly the role of the facilitator to encourage them to have that confidence and share and emerge as leaders, being able to support the development of others. And this just led to more engagement within the group and sharing of resources, having peer-led type support.
1 minute, Michelle.
Perfect. Signposting to other services was another piece that came up. So and this came up, and I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable sharing with this. As running the community of practice online, it wasn't necessarily evident, it wasn't evident at all, the well-being concerns that the students were managing. It wasn't until interviewing the students afterwards that these well-being issues came up as real barriers to them being able to participate, and they actually didn't participate because of them. So thinking about how you can scaffold in well-being into your offering of career services and take that two-tier approach. Last piece was looking at participation by observing and not just posts. So this was considering that actually, I think it can be discouraging when you're running community of practice and forums. If you don't see a student post, you feel like they're not getting pieces out of it, but actually there was a huge learning benefit from students just seeing the post of other students and being able to read them and being okay with that level of participation. And that really came up as a strong theme in the interviews. So I very quickly have gone through the 5 tips. More are in the full article to kind of go in a little bit more detail, but I think I've maxed out my 5 minutes here.
That's perfect, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And now I think we've got some time for questions and answers. So if anyone's got questions for Ilke and Michelle, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A function. And again, a brief preview of yet another brief in the previous slide as well. So thank you for that, Michelle. We're almost coming to the end. We're about to talk about recommendations for good youth work in the next few minutes.
Shall we move on and then maybe take more questions after the next
That
set?
sounds like a good plan.
Okay.
Oh, we've got Liz. Were the communities of practice set up and led by career services, Michelle?
They were involved in it. So the career services gave some suggestions for it, but it was developed by me as a researcher. I've worked in career services for about 3-4 years prior, so I had a little bit of experience I was able to bring in, but the career service at the university looked over it and gave some suggestions for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question.
I think we are going to move on to our next presentation from Magdalena Gillick and her team on job quality and well-being for young people in Europe. Magdalena, you're happy to share your own slides?
Yes, I am. I'm just going to share the slides. Actually, I don't have the option to share the slides.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I can share that desktop if that worked for everyone, right?
Oh,